I'm really happy to be involved in the launch of these pamphlets. I've been involved in the editing process of all of them and have just absolutely loved working with these 4 poets, who are Hannah Hodgson, Carl Knights, Safia Khan and Charlotte Shevchenko-Knight. So we're going to have this evening a quick reading, not too quick, the right amount of time from each of the poets. And if you would like to read along, there's a link that Pete is magically putting in the YouTube chat about now, or maybe it's already there. So you can go to our website and read along there. At the end of these 4 readings, we're also going to have a short Q&A. So if you do have any questions, do drop those in the chat at any point. And again, magically, they will be telepathically transferred to my brain, and then I'll ask them. It's all going to run perfectly smoothly, I can tell. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome our first reader of the night, Hannah Hodgson. This is Hannah's pamphlet, Queen of Hearts, which it's just an astonishing pamphlet. I hope I don't say astonishing too much tonight, but it's fine if I do, isn't it? And I'm going to read you what the judge of the competition, Kim Moore, has said about these poems. The Queen of Hearts lives in a world where the body is a car aflame on a hard shoulder, where the bowel is an octopus patiently swimming in the dark, and a stoma bag is an icing bag of shit piped down the toilet. These poems are scorching in their anger at the way society treats chronic illness and disability, unfailingly precise in their use of metaphor, and wildly imaginative in their deployment of surrealism. Every poem in here is a gift which invites the reader to look at the world differently. So welcome to Hannah Hodgson.
Thank you so much, Suzannah. Honestly, you have been a dream as an editor. You have been absolutely amazing and always made the right call all the time. Everything you've ever said was just perfect about the work. So yeah, I'm just going to read a few poems from that. I think, yes, we're brilliant. This first one is about the experience of having an illness which is incurable, and they know that, and so they kind of like to fluff. Colonel Mustard is waiting in the dining room. If this ward were inside a country manor, it would be hidden behind a bookcase, switch activated, a BNF searched 3 times, secret handshakes, drug protocols with written on fancy menus, Q10 madame, or riboflavin for starters. This ward is an inside joke. There are 3 seats in the waiting room and the table is immaculate. That's how you know you're done for, see, when the staff spend their own money on biscuits. Life here is Cluedo, searching for weapons. It's not the candlestick, I say. It's never the candlestick here. There's no signage, just 2 doors. One for bad news, the other for news so bad there's a pale blue fabric sofa. We piss into pre-warmed pots, staff trying to preempt our every discomfort. My grandfather broke his back catching an arsonist who jumped. We specialise in living when we shouldn't. Death between our teeth, a cold black flag. And this next one is actually where I've been today, and why I'm in the car at the moment. So, the Mark Holland Trust. We wait to soften as vegetables must in boiling water. The room so tiny, we jostle like circles of carrots, talking physio, nutrition, drugs, pneumonia, the ring of white soon to thicken on my brain scan. We're told not to catastrophize as we are boiled. Emotions seep out like vitamins, wastefully discarded down the plug hole. The room is steaming, and soon we're dumped into the colander of home, wet and fragile, separate entities without the cohesive elements of water, simply garnished. This body is ready for consumption. And before I begin this next one, I need to thank Kim Moore for not only her amazing kindness in her judging of this pamphlet, but also for everything she's done for me in poetry, full stop. I would not be a poet without Kim Moore, and she is an incredible person. And I started writing this poem in one of her workshops. Not all bombs get dramatic conclusions. The foam cubes hiding the wiring in the ceiling are liquid stained, and the ward sister stands on a stepladder every few weeks, swapping them around so that they match. The psychiatrists point to the ceiling instead of ink blocks. It's blood, I say. We're below a theatre. The drains backed up last night, and we evacuated the ward. A kid shouted, "By smelling shit, particles of shit are up your nose," until a nurse flushed his nasal cavity with saline to shut him up. The seated scales, the empty wheelchair, a confused man and his penis. The codeine is 15 minutes late, and a woman on dialysis is screaming. "It shouldn't hurt," a nurse says, limping on her stubbed toe. "I want all of this, but beautiful," I say to the matron, her uniform a bright, unread email icon. The curtains are brown stained, saliva stained, conversation stained. Hundreds of people have died on this mattress, I say, and I am not one of them. The man down the hall has an empty pipe in his mouth. Dementia. And orderly mouths as if hiding this from a child. And this one to close is a poem that is the title of the pamphlet, and it's close to my heart. Queen of Hearts. The bed wore me like a ball gown on a subway. Unignorable, melodramatic with its pleats of support. Fancy clutch of a saline bag, the stiletto heel of a dripstand. On this blank wall, there's a signed picture of Diana. They showcase her clothes in Buckingham Palace, trapped ghosts of her hanging from clothes hooks. Her Tamil's mistake was a man, while mine is contained within this hospice. I'm asked if I'd like to read her book. The spine indicates nobody has read it through. She'd approve of my need to get revenge on this body, the ability to escape, health chasing me like a journalist. Thank you so much for having me and to the poetry business for this competition. It's something I've entered every year for my whole poetic career and never ever expected for this to happen. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah. It's a lovely thing that you hear often from winners of this competition, actually, is that, you know, they've kept trying. And I think because it's for poets at an early stage in their career, it's just right for that, you know, that you do, you know, you get some good poems and then you get even more good poems and then you get even more and then you win, and yes, you're here. So thank you. And thank you for that reading. It's incredibly, I'm always incredibly moved by your poems and the way you manage to use kind of surrealism and humor even, and, you know, to address these kind of really, you know, difficult subjects. So thank you. Thanks so much. And I know you've had a bit of a tough day from the sound of it. So thanks for being here too. I'm going to welcome our second reader, who is Carl Knights. This is Carl's pamphlet Kin, as you can see here, with a kind of Lego backdrop, which was some design fun for our designer as well, Katie. Carl Knights' Kin meet inside the hospitals, grow up in waiting rooms and cafeterias where nobody stares. These are poems of survival in the face of disability and years of austerity. They are memorials to those who did not make it. And Kim Moore, who judged the competition, said, in these beautifully crafted, paired back poems, Kin explores what it means to be disabled in a world that can be both unthinkingly cruel and deliberately malevolent. Welcome to Carl.
Thank you, Suzannah. Thank you. To give a quick image description of myself before I start reading poems, I'm a white guy with short brown hair. I wear glasses, and I've got I'd say a nice red long sleeve shirt, and I have stacks of books behind me. And I'm going to start with a poem called How to Wheel. And if you ever find yourself in my neck of the woods in Suffolk and someone says to you, let's go to Colchester Zoo, don't go because it's really hilly, as you'll see in this poem. How to Wheel. The zoo is tough terrain, hilly. I wheel as fast as I can, then Mum shouts, keep up. I stop. Hand me my crutches. I shakily get up, tear off my splints, Velcro straps, and put them on her. I sit her in the chair. You have a go. At first, she spins in circles. No, I say. Use both arms in unison. She still veers away, zigzagging, sweating now. People start to stare. She blushes, keeps her head down. After 10 minutes, she's heaving, shirt drenched. I swing over to her. This next poem it quotes dialogue from a really terrible film called After Thomas, which starred Keeley Hawes. And it's just a dreadful film. And you'll see why it's dreadful in this poem, and the poem actually comes from a line of dialogue from this film. It's called the difference between a dog and a biscuit tin. It's Boxing Day, and I'm nearly 10 and a half. I got a camouflaged Action Man for Christmas. I told Mum I wanted to open it on my own, but my special scissors won't cut the plastic. Just as I start to stick my tongue out and sweat, Mum calls my name from the front room. I shuffle down the stairs on my bum. Mum says I should use the stair lift. She taps me on the shoulder and says, "Look at the telly. This film's got a boy like you. See? He even flaps his hands like you. He's called Kyle." On the screen, a man and a woman stand in a kitchen that looks bigger than ours. Her scarf is the same color as my blue badge. The man rubs his face with his big hands and says, "Whatever happened, Nick? Whatever happened to us?" Kyle happened. Mum tells me to pay attention, but the screen's too bright. The man is now standing in front of a house that posh people have. He shouts too loudly, "For God's sake, it's autism. He doesn't know what love is. He can't tell the difference between a dog and a biscuit tin." Mum pulls my hands from my ears and points toward the person she thinks I am. And unfortunately, that if anyone sort of thinks this was many, many years ago that I was 10 and a half, but recently, say, the Alec McGuinness documentary about his autistic sons, he worried that they wouldn't be able to feel or express love. So unfortunately, that's still with us. That belief is still with us, unfortunately. This next poem is the title poem of the pamphlet, and it's one of the few that kind of explains itself, really. Kin. I was teaching, and then I saw him out the window in his walking frame, playing football with the other kids. I saw the way his legs bent inwards, how his toes touched the floor before the heel. I wanted to catch his eye, have a chat, show him my splints. This next poem, one of the things I love to do is I love encountering disabled poets from the past. And that can be, you know, a 16th century poet or even a BC or BCE poet. I just love finding disabled voices from the past. And one such voice that I came across was a man by the name of Arthur Honeyman, who was an American poet. He published 3, we call them pamphlets, but Americans call them chapbooks. He published 3 pamphlets and 2 collections of essays. And he was working on a biography when he died in 2008. And I was just looking into his life, and I found this incident, and it begged to be a poem. And it's one of the very few poems where I didn't really have to make much up or anything up, really. So here's a poem that uses his life. Arthur Honeyman's birthday, 3 a.m., 1970. Arthur Honeyman wanted a pancake. He was pushed by a friend who was deafened by Vietnam. The waitress looks at them and nods to her boss. She walks over. "We'll get the pancakes," Arthur's friend says. The waitress stares, then looks at her shoes. "You're disturbing the other patrons," she says. A family looks over. "We only want the..." But before Arthur's friend can finish, the waitress says, "I can't believe that something like you would come someplace where people are trying to eat. I thought people like you were supposed to die at birth." Arthur turns to his friend and says, "Why is the waitress talking about you this way? I don't think you look any worse than you usually do." Then the waitress says, "If you don't leave, I'll have to call the police." "Go ahead," Arthur said. "Call them." And the bizarre thing, the stranger than fiction thing, is the Arthur Honeyman and his friend, Richard Pimentel, were arrested under something called an ugly law, which were laws, especially in the States, that were basically prohibited anyone who was deemed unsightly to be in public. And they began to be overturned in the late 1970s, but they stuck around in England, and they got used as recently as 2004 in England. This last poem that I'll leave you with is a different kind of meeting. Rather than a historical meeting, it's a physical, in the flesh meeting. And it's also the first time I realized this after I wrote it. First time I've ever seen the word Senko in a poem. And if anyone knows a poem out there that also has the word Senko in it, I'd love to hear about it. Drop that in the chat. But this is a poem called First Meeting. I'd never met another autistic person. My Senko wanted me to tutor him. I was 15, he was 12. I waited for him in the room we'd been assigned. I could hear the other SEN kids laughing and screaming, arguing with their TAs. Then he came in, Tom. He sat down. My stims, tapping my teeth, twiddling my fingers, spinning my keys, were exactly mirrored. He stared at the floor as I used to. He fidgeted, bounced, rocked. He told me he didn't understand why the girl next to him in maths keeps passing notes and smiling. Why do teachers insist on eye contact when it means nothing? I said I didn't know either. Try and look at their noses or their foreheads. I pulled out some of the board games left in our room, not Monopoly. We sussed we couldn't do numbers. When the bell rang, neither of us knew how to leave. And that's where I will leave. That's where I will leave you. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much too to even though it's my name on the front, there's so much work that a reader doesn't necessarily see that goes on behind the scenes. And everyone at the poetry business has been so brilliant, of Suzannah and Katie and Jack and Ellen, and everybody who looks after the new poets list has done a lot of work to sort of bring these things into being. So thank you to them too. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Carl, for that wonderful reading as well. It's just so great to hear those poems read aloud. I realise that how many times I've seen them on the page and talked to you about them and not heard you read them, and it just brings so much extra to it. So thank you. It's an incredible pamphlet, and it was a joy to work on. So we are going to now welcome our third reader of the evening, Safia Khan, and this is Safia's pamphlet Too Much Mirch, which dwells in the ambiguities of human relationships, exploring how people and communities can be let down or lifted up by those around them. They're sharp and sensitive poems, and they apply empathy to everything they look at. And it says here, family members, bullies, a cadaver in an anatomy lesson. So a wide range of things. And Kim Moore, in her judge's comments, said, these poems constantly surprise me with their inventiveness and imagery, and the way they challenge assumptions and stereotypes and turn them inside out. There are stunning poems here about family, racism, misogyny, and the interplay between them. The particular strength of Safia Khan is her colourful and lively way of writing about people in all their complexity. Welcome, Safia.
Hi guys, it's really, really lovely to be here. And I guess before I start, I just want to say a massive thank you to the poetry business, and also to Kim Moore for judging the competition. I think I'm not going to speak on myself, but just like the quality of the other poets that you've heard and will hear tonight is just testament to who she is, and also the voices that she's chosen to champion, because the kinds of stories that are being told and the kind of poems that are being told by all the poets tonight are ones that we need to hear and don't hear enough. And it was really, really lovely that she's recognised that and given us this platform. I think before I start, I just want to shout out to a couple of people at the poetry business. Suzannah, I think she like, even though everyone says she's amazing, I don't think that like puts it into words. Suzannah's been so supportive in helping me put this pamphlet together and being patient, you know, adjusting deadlines, helping me work around like a busy schedule. So I think she's so accommodating, but also so incisive and brilliant. And I think one of the things I was worried about was, in order to kind of shape a poem, am I going to lose the essence of it or have to compromise part of who I am to be able to tell this story in a palatable way? And Suzannah never made me feel that way. And I always felt like she got what I was trying to say and also pulled out like the best literary version of it. So I'm so grateful to her, and Katie and Jack and everyone else at the poetry business, and Anne and Peter Sampson, who are the reason that I'm writing poetry today, along with Hive South Yorkshire, who I don't know how much funding like local arts councils are getting at the moment under this iteration of the Tory government, but that's how I started writing, is with this small group, Doncaster Young Writers, and it was a part of this wider Hive collective, and they do so much good work for so many young people, and I'm really, really grateful to them, and Vicky Morris, who kind of runs the whole thing and is just a legend and an icon. So I'm going to start off by reading, I think the first poem I'm going to read is called Timeline. And the first line is actually very timely because it's a reference to Love Island, which hopefully some of you in the audience will be watching, following, will get what I'm talking about. Although overall the poem isn't about Love Island, the poem is about why I decided to delete Twitter. Timeline. Regional accent is crying in the beach hut. She has just been properly mugged off. Influencer is offering you laxative branded as flat tummy tea for the summer. Hashtag sponsored, hashtag ad. Breaking news, foreign body drowned crossing the Mediterranean. Influencer is offering you gummy bear vitamins for hair as soft as hair extensions. Hashtag sponsored, hashtag ad. Union Jack is rejoicing. Illegals cannot claim benefits when they are dead. Blonde highlights as elbowing the air in a car park to film a dance for TikTok. Uncredited photograph. Child with seaweed in hair and blue skin is lying on sand next to litter. Blonde highlights is live streaming herself crying on the living room floor. She is so sorry, she was just miming the lyrics. Regional Accent is posting a no makeup selfie to hashtag raise awareness for the ongoing crisis. Google is showing results for the movie Titanic based on your most recent search. Boat, tragedy. So that poem, it's actually quite chaotic to read. I didn't realize that. It makes more sense when you're like looking at it, but I think listening to it maybe scrambles your head a bit, which is how I feel when I use any form of social media. So the next poem now is sort of vaguely related in terms of the theme, but maybe not the form so much. And this is based off a true story. So when I was in school, I used to volunteer with an organization in Doncaster called the Doncaster Conversation Club, and they basically helped welcome new asylum seekers and refugees. And I was one of their English teachers. And this is based on an encounter that I had with one of my students. And this poem is called Fresh Off the Boat. Not enough life jackets, he gives the last one to his sister, who clutches his leg, his body a raft. By the time he makes it to shore, her lungs are full of salt and ice. He holds her limp body all night as they sway in the van like cattle. At night, he stands frying chicken in the back of a shop for rowdy teens, who spit out his country on a list of places the UK should invade, to the soundtrack of Golden Oil splashing. He smirks. They're so drunk, they don't realise they already have. His boss flashes a traffic light eye, reminds him of his pending status. When I teach the proper vocab for clothing, his eyes are nets, catching what swims of them. His hands driftwood when he holds out a phone, asks please if I call him sometime. I can't, I'm only his teacher. He nods. It's just, I have same name as his sister, and this country is cold, and my voice is like, and he points to the board, blanket. So this next poem is a bit more of a personal poem, and I think one of the things that I found difficult is writing about grief or writing about experiences that don't necessarily directly belong to you, but you still think need to be written about. And I've kind of struggled with how to communicate that, sort of where my role is in doing that, if I have a role at all. And I think the sort of interim conclusion that I've reached is maybe that I just have to work out really clearly like what my intention is. And originally I had a different title for this poem. I had a kind of, there was some more maybe details in there that gave parts away that I've chosen not to include, because I think to honor grief or to honor somebody who's passed, you don't necessarily need to give like all the details away about their life or your personal connection to them. So I have entitled this poem Utter Prayer. And for those of you that maybe aren't familiar, in Islam there's 5 daily prayers, and I think the third prayer of the day is Utter. Sorry, I had to like check that in my brain. So that's sort of when the sun is setting, or just before the sun is setting, that's like the afternoon. And it's also the name of a surah in the Quran, which is all about, the surah translates as the declining day, and it's all about time running out. So this poem is sort of written as if I am making a prayer at this time of day. You arrive at the airport with a suitcase full of American goods, M&Ms, watches, hairdryers. Your cousins pull you into a playful chokehold, rub their knuckles against your scalp like flint. Young girls glance at you a moment longer than they should, wilt into women as you move through the street, your green eyes lighting the way like fireflies. Your aunties have made fresh roti and are milling you as you enter the house. Our American boy has come home. Your cousins do not take you for a drive. Instead, you go for a swim in the Swat River, your skin like olive oil in the water. Your cousins look upon your beauty and say, Mashallah. They give you a towel, dry clothes, walk you home safely. They do not take you for a drive. They do not crash the car and carry your body back to the village, shrouded in a leather jacket. Your cousins do not take you for a drive. They drop you at the airport where you give them your salam. You land safely. Your mother holds her precious boy and you hold her back. You finish school, attend college. Your brother learns to cook, not cage fight, because your brother isn't angry. You marry and we steal your shoes at the wedding. On Eid, you walk into the garden with a wife and a baby. Your grandmother kisses you on the forehead. You are her loveliest one. So this next poem that I'm going to write is quite a personal poem. I wasn't even sure whether to include it in the pamphlet. It's inspired by a poem written by Salima Hill called Other People's Mothers, and I've sort of taken that as the first line of the poem. And yeah, I find it difficult to read poems in general out loud because I write them to be read on the page, but I don't know how. I haven't really read this one out loud very much, so I don't know how I'm going to find it. Hopefully I don't get too emotional, because that's a bit, no one wants to see that. Yeah, this poem is called River, and it's inspired by Other People's Mothers by Salima Hill. Other people's mothers don't shout at them in public. I cry in the car on the way back from dinner. Other people's mothers don't cremate their daughter with a look. My mother opens like the seed of a tree. I am sorry, she says. You are right. But other people's mothers had the chance to be daughters. Other people's mothers were softened by rivers. I had to be bedrock all my life. I am sorry you can feel silt in my love, but know you are water to me. Wherever you run, I'll run under you, holding the current like no one else can. Yeah, I love my mum, so shout out to that poem and shout out to my mum. What's the next one I'm going to do? Oh, this next poem is a prose poem that I had a lot of fun writing, and I don't know where it came from. I think it was from a workshop that I'd done with the poetry business, actually, and I can't remember what the prompt was, but I think I was like sick of, I'd been asked this question recently, and I was just sort of sick of like hearing the same questions again and again. But I also found that sometimes when you're dealing with microaggressions in poetry, it's quite difficult not to fall into cliches of how to respond to them. And I didn't want to just write, I guess I didn't want to write another poem being like, I'm actually from here and blah, 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 because I'm like, I've sort of seen versions of that done before. And I don't even really know if I relate to that sentiment anyway. So I kind of took this question, which is the title of the poem, and I don't know, did something else with it. Yeah, I really enjoyed writing this, and I haven't really read it out loud before, but I hope I enjoy reading it as well, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. So the title is the name of a question that, if any of you look vaguely like me, you'll probably be familiar with hearing. But where are you really from? Clay, a shape-shifting clot of blood, the kernel inside the first shell breath of God, primordial soup reduced to its atoms after being brought to boil. Sorry about that. I'll start from the beginning, and I'm going to message my friend later, be like, don't FaceTime me again. Okay. Clay, a shape-shifting clot of blood, a kernel inside the first shell breath of God, primordial soup reduced to its atoms after being brought to boil, the same place as the stars and birds, where everything that ever existed was wrapped in tinfoil and microwaved into being. An iron ballerina, pirouetting round the sun and sweating out the oceans. Mountains formed in an ice tray mold, a patch of grass that drifted from elsewhere, a patch of grass still drifting. Like a refugee with amnesia, I cannot recall home, though once in a while I catch its fragrance on the wind. So yeah, that was that one. I don't know if anyone else has this. I really struggled to read poems out loud. And I don't think it's because I can't read. Like, I know that I can read, but it's an interesting thing, and I've not really had to do it very much because of the pandemic. I guess the relationship of what you've written for the page and then performing it for an audience. And also there's not really an audience, it's just a blank Zoom screen. So I think I'll enjoy reading this one though. I don't think this will feel awkward. This is genuinely one of my favorite poems in my collection. And I know that's weird to say because like everyone's supposed to hate what they write. But the reason I really like this is because it genuinely makes me laugh. And I think that's like the best kind of joke. If you laugh at your own joke, then it's a good joke, regardless of whether anyone else gets it or not. So this poem, I didn't dedicate it to him in the end. At the time, I wanted to dedicate it to Jeff Bezos. I think I can now probably dedicate it to Elon Musk, whoever's like currently the richest guy in the world. I don't know who that is. Seems to change quite regularly. But yeah, this poem is dedicated to those guys, who definitely won't ever see this, but shout out to them anyway. This poem is called The Last Man on Earth. The last man on earth begins solitude by relishing his freedoms. Newfound proprietor of every landfill, he gloats, proud as the one chosen first from the queue of lambs lining up for the abattoir, crowns himself king for an empire of one. When the ocean coughs up a new shoal of oil-slick fish, he feels justified in naming their corpses after himself. Has he not earned the right to inherit the earth? Has he not hustled, in spite of warnings from the papers and protesters, his way to accumulating all that the world has to offer? If it takes setting the planet on fire to up his stock price, he knows that in business, it's every man for himself. When retirement comes sooner than planned, he treks the whole Trans-Siberian Railway just to spot trains that lay crashed off the tracks. He collects bricks from the collapsed Great Wall, plays a jumbo-sized game of solo Jenga. With a Swiss army knife, he carves out the face of Mona Lisa, turns her into a photo stand-in. He wanders round derelict shopping malls, tries on wigs and prom dresses to reenact makeover montage scenes from the movies. Though he never tires of graffitiing statements about the size of his manhood on every billboard, it isn't long before the piles of dead bodies rotting on each street corner start to creep him out. He was never the spiritual type, but he swears sometimes he can hear them groaning his name. One morning, a corpse strewn in parts across the pavement points its flesh-eaten finger towards him. He tells himself it's a trick of the light. More and more, he keeps to his library, sleeps behind a makeshift trench of stacked thesauruses. Since the supply to demand ratio of buttons has never been better, he crafts sock puppets and recreates his favorite childhood stories. Eventually, he'll retreat to a church in the woods, drop to his knees in the confessional booth. But there'll come no pardon from the Father. Palms press stone in rigor mortis prayer. I hope that doesn't happen because I hope that we don't all die and Elon Musk is the last person left on Earth. But that poem sort of came from imagining. I think that's why I enjoy it. It was fun to imagine what this person who spent their whole life trying to accumulate all this stuff would do once they finally had it and there was no one else left to enjoy anything. So I'm going to change tack a little bit now, and I'm going to read you the last poem from my collection, which is I don't know. I mean, all of these poems are in a way quite personal, but I guess this is slightly more personal than some of the other poems in the collection. And it's difficult to write. I think it takes a lot of courage. Like the other poets that we've heard tonight have written really personal things in a really, really beautiful way. And I find it really hard to do that. One of the things I enjoyed when writing this collection was learning that I don't just have to write poems about myself. And I kind of realized that a little bit late in the game. Having said that, I also wrote this poem quite late on, and I still wanted to put it in the collection just because I think what it represents to me, and hopefully what it represents to other people if they read it and take anything from it. But yeah, this is kind of inspired by true events, and I won't say much more than that. But this poem is called Honeymoon for One. I nearly drowned treading water in the ocean you promised me. A wave offered me up to the shore like a prayer trapped in plastic. I made a roof from the veil, a dream catcher from my bangled wrists. Castaways are by nature resourceful. I make fires with flint fingers, write poems in the sand, hold myself the way milk is held by coconut husk. After dreams of you, I lift a conch shell to my ear. This will pass. Last night, I saw tourists with binoculars on a catamaran. This morning, an ogling fisherman. I imagine him carving me into wood as myth, the jilted bride whose eyes turn to sea urchins. Consider this my message in a bottle. I am alone and alive. My soul does not need saving. Thank you so much for listening to me read, and thank you again to all of the people who helped make this little collection possible. Like Hannah, I'd entered this poetry competition a couple of times before, and then I was like, I'm not going to do it again. I've had no luck. What's the point? And I met Kim Moore in an online workshop, and she was the one who actually prompted me to apply. So I'm really, really grateful to her because it's been a really wonderful opportunity. And also a message to anyone if they're watching this, like, if you don't succeed in something the first, the second, the third time, just keep trying. And if you don't succeed here, it's not a reflection of anything. Just keep trying. Someone somewhere will resonate with what you're doing. I'm sure everyone has a lot more rejections than they have successes, but you only need like 1 or 2 successes to kind of move you forward, even if that has to come with a lot of rejections at the same time. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, guys.
Thank you, Safia, for those incredible poems, and also for the motivational speech. You know, I feel like you've got people fired up, hopefully, to write poetry, and to get involved. Thank you. So it is now time to welcome our final reader of the night. A reminder that there is a Q&A as well, so I'm sure you are all thinking of lots of questions that you have for the poets, so if you can pop them in the chat, we will have just a quick, few minutes after the readings in order to, hear their thoughts. But before that, Charlotte Shevchenko-Knight and her pamphlet Ways of Healing. Ways of Healing is an embodied collection with a distinctive and tough and tender voice. Charlotte Knight explores themes of longing, of loss, of pain, and its remedies. These poems are alive with their own vulnerability, are at times unnerving, and always packed with astonishing sensations and images. I've really loved working on this pamphlet. Charlotte had a poem, I think, commended or win in the national poetry competition a few years ago, and as I think there was something I recognised in that poem that I think is a thread throughout the whole of this pamphlet, actually. Kim Moore says, "Ways of healing will break your heart and slowly put it together again. These poems take real risks in their navigation of the difficult landscape of abortion and painful relationships, deploying beautiful lyric phrasing and a playful use of form to create a world where darkness and light, possibility and endings can coexist together." Welcome to Charlotte.
Hiya, thank you for the intro. Before I read, I'll just sort of, I've just been thinking about it a lot. I think so many people I'm grateful towards, but mostly my family, who've really supported me throughout this whole poetry thing for so long now. Also to Kim for selecting the pamphlet, and Suzannah for your help editing, to my Goldsmiths cohort who have really pushed me over the years. I'm just so grateful to endless amounts of people. I'm really excited that this exists now. So I'll start with reading Moon Daddy, which was the poem in the National Poetry Competition. Moon Daddy. Today, the doctor asked if I was planning on keeping it. Right now, it is a grainy little moon, distorted by dark waves that I know, with the slightest change of tide, might pull us closer together. Being in love is like drowning in space, oh baby. You gaslight me so hard. The days when you pretend we do not know each other fill me with all this understanding for foxes, screaming in the night for want of sex. Imagine your reaction to something concrete, proof of a world in which we have both existed momentarily, even if it is just this malformed pearl ready to be crushed. Strange thinking about that poem all those years ago. It's so funny starting to write something and the time it takes for it to get published, and how you sort of change as a person over that time, and your feelings change. And it's nice for this to come out now and feel very much at peace. Anyway, this is a sort of a follow-up to Moon Daddy. It's called Clinic, the Winter Self. Part 1. Running into the sea fully clothed is a symptom. So are the crowds forming, the perpetual sunsets and sharp applause. I am sick with wanting. I just want to hold a child in the snow. I want to dab their face with antibacterial wipes. Part 2. After my January swim, which was more a thrashing in the waves lost in television static, I buy a coffee made the wrong way, milk first. Wet silk, beige gossamer twirling around a cup, I think back to the clinic, paper cups atop a water cooler bubbling with mild anger. I just want an answer. Is depression a glitter? Does my empty womb mean something? Part 3. I was born in January. My mother was afraid to take me outside for fear I would inhale cold air and freeze from the inside out. I picture my childhood self as a small instrument made of glass into which air and spit is blown. It produces an awful whistling, which can only be heard by dogs. I am afraid of the sounds I make, the ways in which my body alienates others. I am afraid of the ceaseless winter of myself. This next poem may be a bit more joyful. It starts with, Well, the first line is a tweet that just seems so nonsensical and beautiful to me that I had to write a poem. It's called Apollonia Ponders. What if we kissed and all my teeth fell into your mouth? What if we kissed and the kiss was pink liquid, was a rose water? What if stuffed vine leaves we passed between mouths? What if goat's milk? What if I was of notable Christian faith or lived on a golden island? What if teeth equals rejection and every dream has a meaning? What if every poem was a pink liquid and when we kissed, our tongues became petals? What if soft island, a saintly presence? What if we jumped into the fire and you, a husband? What if we forged this? What if we invoked each other for toothache, for some other pain? And back to the sad ones. This is a poem after Anne Carson. And what I found with putting the pamphlet together is that so many poems were after Anne Carson. She's such a huge influence for me and someone whose mind just truly inspires me. There's no other way to put it. This is after her translation of Sophocles. It's called You Are a Woman Marked for Sorrow. You are a woman marked for sorrow, for blood in silk underwear, abdominal pains, clinic visits, the uncaring doctor, the uncaring boyfriend that Uber home in silence, leftover noodle grease on the sideboard, chafed thighs, small messes, sirens in the night, hushed phone calls in the hallway, essential oils to lull you to sleep, lavender head, chamomile pillow, the man who snores effortlessly next to you, pelvic twinges, the sighing dog, yearning to either have or become a child, cold cups of tea, general forgetfulness, care at the center of all your longings, self-help books, crystal healing, jade eggs, swimming at dawn, drinking salt water, taking in all of nature, wanting to become a natural woman, childbearing hips, fallopian hurries, questioning relatives, and sorrow, and sorrow, and sorrow. Yeah, I never really know what to say about my poems. They are their own sort of emotional landscapes, and it's quite difficult to read them myself. I don't know. Hopefully other people enjoy them. This is a lockdown poem because, I mean, when we sort of entered the pamphlet, it was around that time, right? So it was inevitable that something of that era would seep into the manuscript. This is called I Want to Swallow a Light Bulb. It's my birthday, and I'm breaking the law by touching your hand at the beach. I'm supposed to lie down in the sand with you. I'm supposed to let crabs crawl over my body and get jealous when they start crawling over yours. This year, let's not say mean things to each other. Everyone else is free game though. My neighbor runs from me like a muntjac, failing to understand that we are all angry at someone. The way the sun courses closer to our planet is proof of that. After promising not to write about you anymore, I spent 3 long days wondering how I'd feel if God took the ocean away from us. I still haven't decided. Got a couple more for you. I'm just trying to remember which ones they were. I've got these little, this is the only way I would have any order to this. This is called Someone Lit a Candle Once. Someone lit a candle once and they died. Some say of asphyxiation, others carelessness. When I think of you, I forget myself, forget my tongue, how to taste. Garlic means nothing. And love is one big conspiracy. The government is occupying my heart while I sleep, stealing its pigeons, replacing their batteries. It's a systemic ablation. I have woken to an FBI agent hovering over me, scalpel in hand. I have asked, hey, What are you doing? He has said, I better call my lawyer. Love is one big super injunction, and I am backtracking. I am forgetting the nasty things you have said, forgetting the knife. There will be a sudden taste of rhubarb before I remember I have forgotten how to taste. Someone lit a candle once, and the candle said, hey, what are you doing? And then they died. Some say of shock, others cytokinesis, which is the physical process of cell division, in which the cytoplasm of a parental cell divides into two daughters, which is not what love is. I bear you no daughters. I am wearing my shades as I walk into the clinic. I am holding a state-issued flashing device which helps us to forget that asteroids are falling on Mars right now, or that our daughter is the size of a grape, or that she will never be anything more. I'll read one last poem for you. It's the final poem of the pamphlet. It's also the title of the pamphlet. Interestingly, this poem came from when I was a kid. My mother had a book of sort of herbal remedies that she would use for me. And I was just flicking through it and I realized how much that spoke to what this pamphlet was doing. So yeah, this is Ways of Healing. And my cat's just come into the room. So if you hear any meowing, it's not me. Ways of Healing. If your dreams are plagued by mice, hot lavender porridge in the morning. If a sinister ha settles over the village, if a child's cries are thick with illness, rub unbroken eggs and rosemary sprigs across their body. Wave an eagle's feather any time you sense their fear. For broken bones, pass the child through a cleft in an ash sapling. For a broken heart, place rose quartz beneath your tongue, grip your mouth shut, hope for the best. After a negative pregnancy test, find a wet hill to roll down, pout your lips whilst you roll, kiss the ground as much as possible, lie down in a bush of milkweed, let its pearly sap ooze over your sunspots. In damage, there is healing. My mother recommends rubbing hot vinegar across my breasts. I'm not sure what for. Before a party, stuff your bra with cabbage leaves for perkier nipples. Trust me. To draw blood from the earth, bury a spoon in the garden. A clover will grow. Pluck it. Place it on your tongue. It should dissolve, leaving behind a metallic taste. The morning after a breakup, strip down to your underwear on a public beach. Walk into the winter waves. This is as close as you'll get to being vulnerable again. So that's Ways of Healing. I just want to say thank you to everyone for watching this evening. Thank you to the Poetry Business for hosting this event. It's been amazing to hear everyone read from their work, and it's been very exciting to be included and be a part of this. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Wonderful to hear those poems. We are at the point of our Q&A commencing. So if you poets would like to reappear yourselves magically, and it's not too late. If you do have a question, you can pop that in the chat on the YouTube as well. So that's good. We have, to start with, we have a question from Kim Moore, which is good, isn't it? She's here. She came to see us. I mean, I expect nothing less from Kim, actually. But she says, I have a question about future plans in terms of, publication plans. Are there any new books or pamphlets or even just projects that you're working on that you're really excited about that are in the pipeline? Should we go, Carl? Do you want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. It's an interesting question. I think the funny thing for me is that usually no poem or project happens smoothly for me. There's usually a lot of pitfalls of, say, for example, this book, people have mentioned already that it was their 4th, 5th, 6th entry. I think this one was my 8th or something ridiculous like that. And there's usually a lot of the best laid plans of Mice and Men and all that. Usually things go awry somewhere. But I think for me, the poems, I don't know about books or pamphlets, but I do know the poems I'm working on now. If people know the pamphlet, there's the penultimate poem in the pamphlet is an elegy. And I've been writing a lot recently in that mode, which, yeah, sort of as cheery as it sounds, I suppose. but whether anything happens with those, I haven't the faintest idea. But that's where my poet head is at the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, sometimes that happens, that a particular thread feels like it's the one to kind of keep pulling on. And yeah, it sounds incredibly necessary, I think, if it's that to be writing that. So yeah, we'll read them hopefully at some point. It'd be lovely. I don't mean lovely, I mean, like, necessary and powerful and good. Yeah, I mean those things. Hannah, how about you? I know you are publishing a lot.
Yeah, so shielding happened for 2 years, still doing it now. Sent out 3 manuscripts and they all got taken, so it's a busy year. So in March, my first collection came out with Seven, 163 days, which is very, very exciting. And it also got turned into a radio short, which was very cool. And if anyone would like to listen, that's on BBC Sounds. This has been an amazing thing. And next up, I've got a pamphlet for Sleep in September. So busy year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think future plans, a second collection, and a rest year.
Yeah. Yes, the rest is as important as anything else, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah, but it has been the most incredible year, and I don't want it to sound like I'm saying, oh God, I've been published too much. I do not mean that at all. It has been an utter shock and joy. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, I can highly recommend, if anyone would like to, hasn't read 163 Days. I think Carl was waving it around before as well. But yeah, if you haven't read that, get on it. It's fantastic. Great. Charlotte, how about you? What are you working on?
I'm working on my first full-length collection, which is first manuscripts kind of done now. It's on sort of generational trauma amongst Ukrainian women, and examines long-term effects of the famine. So really light-hearted stuff. It's it's been a long sort of, I started writing it October last year. So it's been a long sort of period of research and looking at archives and so on. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. I'm sort of hoping to do a PhD next year that will be able to look at that more in focus as well.
That's great. Have you found, sorry, this is a side question, but of course, Ukraine has been in the news so much. Have you found that what you were doing with that collection or where it was going, have you found that's changed?
Yeah, massively. The trajectory completely changed. It went from just being about sort of my childhood to much more recent experiences with sort of trying to get my grandparents and my auntie visas to come to the UK, and then the process of having to get them to the UK as well was a very so it has of course completely changed the trajectory, but I'm still figuring it out basically, but it totally basically. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah. And Safia, what have you been up to?
My degree. That is what I've been up to. So yeah, I'm just like, I'm gonna once I'd submitted this, I was also like, oh shit, I've now actually got to write a whole thing, not just a portfolio of 12 poems. And actually, I was a bit worried because this poem is kind of an amalgamation of all the stuff that I've written since I started writing. So I didn't really know what the finished thing was going to look like. I didn't think there was like an overall cohesive theme. The only thing they had in common was that I wrote them. And something that Charlotte said, which is really true during her reading, is that I'm not the same person. When I wrote some of these poems, I'm not the same person now. Like some of them were written over 5 years ago. And they're not necessarily poems that I would write now, but I didn't want to just bin them. And I also didn't have time to write all of the poems from scratch. So I think what was really exciting that came from this was realizing I can actually write about anything I want. Like initially, because a lot of this stuff, which I think a lot of early career poets can relate to, is stuff that maybe prompts from workshops or things that you read. You're sort of working directly from those sources. And so a lot of it can feel a bit like derivative or samey because the same sort of things tend to come up in workshops. And then I had a bit of a meltdown and I was like, I can't write another poem about my grandma. No one wants to read a whole collection of this. So I think once I'd sort of gone through that, I was like, oh wow, actually I can write about anything. So I've not sort of started working on anything by any means, but I've definitely been giving some thought about what I would want like my next project to look like. And I think it would be really, really different from this. Like I wouldn't want to write it about like anything. Obviously everything you write has like a personal element to it, but I think the next thing I want to work on is like a narrative sequence that I've been thinking about and sort of turning those characters and their experiences into like a series of poems and letters. And also I think maybe because it's like the nature of the like what I want to do in my actual career as a non-writer, I really want to try writing non-fiction because that's something that I think is important and like is actually what I read a lot more of. But and Kim's like sort of set the precedent for that. Like you can write excellent poetry and also excellent essays and non-fiction, and you don't have to compromise one to write the other. So I think that's what I'd like to do in future, but right now I'm like, I'm a bit poemed out.
But also you're free to write about whatever you want, and that's like a nice feeling.
Yeah,
too,
definitely.
you know, there are so many like ways you could go, and
yeah,
like
it is exciting to be able to do that, because once you have an idea, which is like something that maybe wouldn't have come to you just from, I guess, writing from a prompt, once you have like an original idea and you have the confidence of having already produced something, you're like, oh, I can actually do this, I can create like my original thing and see it through to completion. And I think had I not written this pamphlet, I wouldn't have the confidence to like have faith in my own ideas.
Yeah, absolutely, that's really good. That's it's good to hear, actually. So we have another question. I think we probably have only got time for one more, which is from Anne the Poet, who says, and it's a little bit what we've just talked about, actually, but so has the experience of working on your pamphlet changed your writing process in any way? Hannah, do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, it's definitely changed how I would order my poems in quite a radical way, because a lot of the poems I thought, oh, that can't possibly go next to that, but then you find this like golden thread running through every poem, and you can get that order that is a whole poem in itself. And I've really learned that, and kind of printing the poems out and putting them on the floor and working with yourself, Suzannah, it has made me think that things that I don't think work together really do, and quite freeing actually, because in this pamphlet I've been a bit risque, which is a thing for me that I've never done before. So yeah, it's the same thing that was just said, realizing how free you are to write. And yeah, I probably wouldn't give those poems to my grandparents, but it doesn't mean that that side of my life doesn't exist and that side of my poetic life shouldn't exist. So it's been really good from that point, kind of as a piece of art, and it being me and mine has been huge for me.
Yeah, that's, yeah, there's so much for so much to be said for I guess those different poetic selves almost that you manage to kind of we keep saying free, but yeah, set free in that pamphlet, or they're that there's a range of experiences and a range of selves in there, and I think that's that's a really positive experience as a reader as well. Yeah, Carl, how about you? Do you want to answer that question?
I can chime in. Yeah, I think it didn't sort of change the writing process for me in terms of the nuts and bolts of individual poems, but it did change the way that I think about poems a lot. I'd never had the experience of putting poems next to each other before, and it was so fascinating to see that even though there was work from 6 or 7 years ago and then work that was more recent, there was a continuum through it all, and they all had something of me in them, even if I wrote a poem off and thought, oh, that's from a different person, I actually realized, no, it's still from you, and you're still not necessarily concerned with the same things, but you're working through whatever it is that you're interested in. And I don't think I'd quite realized how similar, in a good way, work from 6 years ago is to work I wrote yesterday. And I sort of realized that it all comes from one person, and for better or worse, you're you, and they're your poems, and they all have something of you in them, I think, which hadn't dawned on me for some reason before.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you'd entered the competition a few times, and that is, what I notice when people enter more than once is, oh, that's such a good poem, and then maybe it's like 2 good poems, and then maybe it's like 50-50, and then it's all brilliant, and you notice that building up. And I think there's something to be said for knowing your own good ones, knowing your own good work, and kind of having faith in it, actually, even if it's published 5 years down the line, and you're writing some different things as well now, Yeah. Charlotte?
So when I was writing, the pamphlet is also coincidentally my master's dissertation, and that was a really interesting one, sort of, I guess, putting it together. It was the first time I was writing something that was actually personal, and trying to kind of not censor myself, but just know my own boundaries. That was kind of what putting Ways of Healing together felt like to me. It was sort of finding out how I felt about myself and how I felt about other people knowing myself, if that makes sense. And in a way, it's like a confidence booster to be able to put it out there, and people can read it and they can think what they want to think. But I found a way to present what's happened in a way that I feel comfortable with, if that makes sense.
Definitely. There's this idea, I think it's a Sharon Olds idea of the apparently personal. And so, which I think all four of you, you certainly write poems that seem apparently personal, but how personal they are is still a choice, actually. You know, how much that speaker in your poems is you, and how much they are a version of you, and how much they give away, and how much, you know, and how much they share is, I think, is really, you know, it's still there. It's still part of the process. Safia, I know you talked about how you changed your process a little bit already, but is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think actually loads about the way that I write has changed by doing this. I've learned so much about writing, and some of that is I guess from like a technical perspective. Some of it is like the physical aspects of process, like working out when in the day I'm better at writing poems. And it's usually like in the middle of the night when I've like randomly woken up, and you kind of have an idea, and then if you're like, oh, I'm not going to write it down, like you'll have an idea for a line or something, or like if you're really tired or whatever, you're like, oh, I'll write it down later, and then you don't, and you obviously don't remember it even though you tell yourself you will. So I've just, part of that is just like the mechanics of, if you think of something, write it down there, and then get your notes up out, write on a notebook, whatever the time is, because you don't know when you're going to come back to it and what it will lead to. But I think in terms of process, I'm not gonna lie, I started off writing this thinking like, I have no idea what I write about or why I'm writing. I was like, I write poems because I liked creative writing as a child, and then it's kind of something that I've fallen into doing. So now that I'm not a child anymore, I have to think really consciously, okay, what is my intention? And actually figuring out my intention as a writer, and therefore trying to ensure that is like communicated through the work, is a really important part of my process now. And I think it's maybe what's also given me permission to move away from the more personal stuff, because I think, like Charlotte said, it is working out where your boundaries are, and when you're young you don't always know how to do that. And it's also easy to read other people's work, which can be so like intensely confessional and extremely personal, that makes you think, oh, I have to write like that, because you can only like vomit what you eat. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think part of it is just learning to read more widely. Part of it is and also like read critically. Part of it is learning when and how to write poems, and also recognizing I don't need to wait for like a prompt in a workshop necessarily to write a poem. I can just try to write one of my own accord and see where it takes me. And then I guess part of it is thinking about really clearly, what's my intention, what do I want to write about, and not being married to that. Like I might have an idea and it might go somewhere completely different, like but where are you really from? I didn't start off wanting to write the poem that I ended up writing, it just kind of happened. So I guess trusting that, it's like, I think it's Robert Frost who said, like, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. So I think just if something surprises you while you're writing it, just go with it. So that's something that I've learned to enjoy, like letting the random stuff that comes out surprise me, because also that it isn't random. Like what exists on the surface of our subconscious that sort of evaporates and forms our conscious level of thought is what needs to come up. And I don't know what that process is. I don't know what the neural basis is of that, but I trust that process, and I'm learning to like trust that a lot more, that whatever I need to say without knowing I need to say it will come out. But I still, in terms of like figuring out which poems work and which ones don't, that's the part of the process that I'm like, just find a good editor. Because I still do this with every single poem I write. As soon as I've written it, I'm like, this is the best poem anyone's ever written. And then the next morning I read it, I'm like, kill yourself. This is the worst thing that's ever been done. Burn everything that you've ever written, throw your laptop in the sea. So, and then you kind of give it some time and you can arrive at a slightly more objective version. But I also think part of the process is finding other people that you trust to read your work and give you good feedback, because there's no way, literally no way, that I could have done this by myself. So
Yeah.
My little insight.
I mean that's certainly something I'm guilty of, is thinking the thing I've just written is the best thing ever. You know, I think it happens to everybody. But yeah, there has to be some way of like distancing yourself from it and finding a measured response. But yeah, you're not alone there at all. Thank you. Well, thank you to all of you. Thank you everybody for watching. Please go to the Poetry Business website if you have not already, and get hold of these pamphlets. It's poetrybusiness.co.uk. There's a bundle, so you can, if you buy all 4 of them together, you get a little bit of money off. So that's a treat, isn't it? And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed listening to our 4 poets. A silent, I guess we'll do a kind of an awkward Zoom wave, but as we do, maybe you can give a silent round of applause that we won't hear to Carl Knights, Charlotte Shevchenko Knight, Safia Khan, and Hannah Hodgson. Cue awkward wave.